So add up, make a list of all of the people that are friends that you know and for whom you have an email or a telephone number. Now, let's talk about your potential for fundraising. Do a little math here. So the most common crowdfunding donation is $20. The average for Love Utah, Give Utah tends to be lower. We emphasize the $10 donation. I want to encourage you, if you're participating in Love Utah, Give Utah, to be sure on your page there and in all of your communications to invite people to make that $10 donation, but give them a reason to make a larger donation too, because people are so easy, it's so easy to convince people to make a $20 donation. A lot of people think of $10 as being almost not worth doing. If you're going to make a donation, make at least 20. So give people an excuse to give you 20. Give people an excuse to give you 30, 50. There are a lot of people that will do that. So make sure that you are providing language to encourage them to increase their giving this year on Love Utah, Give Utah. Try and do it without making them feel guilty for giving 10. You don't want to miss out on 10. Yes?
What would you suggest in terms of how many options are most effective? Like if you're going to start with 10, what is the incremental increase, and then how many choices?
That is a great question. We're going to talk more about rewards in a minute, but that isn't part of what I normally cover. So I would think you want to be fewer than 10 options. And there's no reason on Love Utah, Give Utah, because you can give any amount you want, 3 to 5 is probably enough. But you may want to give people a clear indication of what you can do with their $50. If they give 20, what happens? If they give 50, what can you do with that? If they give 100, if they give 500, what can you do? And that's probably enough examples. I would caution you not in a crowdfunding campaign, in general, in any crowdfunding campaign. I would discourage you from publicly offering any rewards for giving more than $1,000 because what that tends to do is just make people feel like the $20 they could give is meaningless, because what you really want is $5,000, right? If you have a $5,000 option on there, people will come, they'll see that, and they'll say, oh, you really don't want my $20, and I don't have 50, so, or 100 or 500, so they feel embarrassed giving you 20. So don't ask for too much. Back to the math. So the average is $75 across broad swaths of crowdfunding campaigns. And so that means that there are a few fairly large donations that are coming in. In fact, people do give $100, $500, $1,000 occasionally, and that brings that average up, even though $20 is far and away the most common donation. So if you average $75 in a campaign, and you have 1,000 friends, and you can get 10% of them to give, which is a pretty reasonable expectation, then you could raise $7,500 all by yourself. So that's 1,000 friends, 10% of them give. That's 100 that give, 75 each, $7,500. Now let's talk about going viral. This is where your score comes in. Now I want to be clear, the score is not scientific. This is the product of my analysis after talking to dozens of people who have had successful campaigns. I've revisited this over and over again. I still believe this is right, but I don't want to misrepresent. This is not scientifically proven. But if you score between under 10 points or fewer, you probably shouldn't be crowdfunding. Now, did anybody in here score fewer than 10 points? Raise your hand high if you scored less than 10 points. No, you're not supposed to raise your hand. No, I don't believe it. We'll talk later. You didn't score under 10 points. No one with a legitimate campaign scores under 10 points. Okay. There are people, but they're not in this room, that would score under 10 points. 11 to 20, I didn't mean to embarrass you. No one was supposed to raise their hand. So I apologize. If you score between 11 and 20, I won't ask for a raise of hands, but there may be some people in that range. You can count on your network to deliver. So you can go ahead and do crowdfunding. if you score 21 to 25, you can probably raise 25% of your money from outside of your network. Your network will help you reach out beyond your scope. So if you could raise $7,500 yourself with your own network, you could potentially raise $10,000 if you've got a good score. Now, if you have a really good score, 26 and above, well, then you're in kind of the optimal range. And there is a chance that you could raise 4 times the capacity of your own network. So if your network is good for $7,500, then you may be able to raise $30,000. That's what Jennifer Windrum did, right? Now, I think that was in part a combination of the appeal of her cancer, the cleverness of the sock monkeys, and also the hard work that she did. She really worked that campaign hard. And we'll talk more about what she did and some of the things you can do. But let's take it for instance. If you have 3 partners and you all have a network that can potentially deliver $7,500 and you score 27, for instance, well, the 7,500 times 3 is 22,500 times 4 is $90,000. That's a pretty good potential for crowdfunding. So you can see how there is potential to raise real money. How many would like to raise $90,000 in a crowdfunding campaign? It starts to sound like real money, doesn't it? Now, I realize some of you have multi-million-dollar budgets, and $90,000 isn't huge. But it matters, right? Think about it matters to your budget to be able to raise that kind of money. That's certainly going to cover an FTE or 2. It would make a difference in almost any organization. And what happens with crowdfunding is, although a lot of money comes from your inner circles, people who are already supporting you, what we saw with Love Utah, Give Utah is about 30 or 40% of the money was from new donors across the board. We saw that kind of statistic. So this is a great way to expand your donor base. So let's talk about platforms. This is one of the last parts of our assessment or reconnaissance phase. You've got to choose a platform. If you're talking about Love Utah, Give Utah, that choice is made for you. The Community Foundation of Utah has chosen Razoo again for this year. And Razoo is a great platform. And you could use that for other campaigns, right? That's a good option. Another option is Fundly. Fundly is the biggest crowdfunding platform for nonprofit type. Another one is Start Some Good, Indiegogo, Kickstarter. There are literally hundreds of others. I just got to know a couple more yesterday. In fact, ironically, they're some of the oldest ones. They were created before the word crowdfunding was created, but one called Universal Giving, another one called Global Giving, that you may want to check out. But there are literally hundreds of platforms. One thing, well, we'll talk more about this. So each one of these platforms has a different fee structure, although the fees tend to be very similar. I would probably never recommend choosing a platform solely on the basis of the fees. But you want to think about the fundraising rules. That's one of the keys. So Kickstarter, which is the biggest crowdfunding platform of all, has a rule, and other crowdfunding platforms use this rule as well, but their rule is that you can't keep the money unless you reach your goal. So if you say, I'm going to set a goal to raise $30,000, if you raise $29,632, you don't keep a dime, right? The donors never actually pay. So no money changes hands. The nice thing is the experience was free. You probably learned a lot, made some new friends, but you didn't get any money. That actually has some validity and may be the right thing for you to do. In the case of the school in Pakistan, using an all-or-nothing model may make sense. What are you going to do with $47,000 if you need $50,000 to build the school? You don't want to build 78% or 92% of a school. You want to build a school. And if it's going to cost $50,000, you need $50,000. And so what it does is it reassures your backers that they will not have to pay if you're not going to have enough to do the project. So it actually does have an advantage for you in certain circumstances. But a lot of campaigns will allow you to keep what you raise. Some of them will charge you more if you fail to reach your goal. And they'll charge you a lower fee if you reach your goal. Each kind of has its own community. Kickstarter, for instance, will not allow a nonprofit to go on and just do a fundraiser. If you are doing something creative, so for instance, if you are the Utah Symphony and you want to crowdfund the production of a new DVD or a CD, that works. But if you just want, if you're the Utah Symphony and you want to go on and just raise money for the symphony, their Kickstarter will likely tell you no. That's what their rules say, and they do that all the time. One of the biggest problems I hear with Kickstarter is that they do tell you no sometimes, and they tell you no late in the process. You might be preparing for weeks and putting material on and only be told kind of at the last minute that they don't approve of you. I haven't heard that complaint about any of the other sites. Now, the last piece of the preparation is to begin thinking about the media that may be willing to cover you and pay attention to you. Here's one of the keys I want you to understand. In every case where I talk to people that have been successful in crowdfunding, they got the media involved. In every case. So if you're thinking about doing a crowdfunding campaign, you need to be thinking about how you access the media. Okay, so we're ready to start preparing. Whew! We've been at this almost an hour, and now we're ready to start talking about preparing for our crowdfunding campaign. Are you beginning to get the sense that crowdfunding is a little bit of work? Yes. So some of you may have tried crowdfunding in the past and may not have raised a lot of money. Has anybody had that experience? Yeah, some of you. And it's in part, it's because crowdfunding successfully is a lot of work. And I hope you appreciate that if you're willing to do the work, the money is there for most of you. Yes?
Can I also just make a comment?
Yes, you may.
You know, I think that crowdfunding is a really new thing and has a lot of potential, and you're doing a great job. The thing that I like to think about is all of us in this room do benefits or other fundraising events. And I think a point that you're making here and there, and it's really an important point, is you can't just keep going back to the well, like on that Kickstarter page and on that, and just say, I'm raising money for my organization, because you're basically raising money from the same people that you're raising money from 2 or maybe more times a year.
Right.
And that really ensures that you're going to fail.
Yeah.
Because people are like, again?
Again?
So that's why, the points you're making about having a specific cause, having a creative project, having a deadline on that, really trying to appeal to maybe people that you're not normally asking for money is really critical in this kind of thing.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for failure, and you've done a huge amount of work to get ready to fail.
Yes.
I'm just reiterating some of the points that it's a jazzy thing to do, but not if you're going to the same folks.
Yeah. One of the points I should make too is that crowdfunding is really just a part of a good development plan. I like to say that no development plan is complete without crowdfunding, but crowdfunding is not a complete development plan, right? It's only a piece. And for most organizations, it ends up being a small piece. For the smallest organizations, those that are newest and just getting started, it can play the biggest role and have the most impact. I don't think there's any organization, though, that's so large they shouldn't be looking at crowdfunding as a part of their development strategy. So preparation, we're going to talk about building and organizing the teams, your lists of people, designing the recognition and rewards. We've talked a little bit about that. We'll develop that further. We're going to talk about drafting emails and tweets and writing a press release. And then finally, we will actually do a video. So first off, we talked about organizing. We talked about it in the assessment stage, how you needed to think through who are your partners. I just can't emphasize enough, there's this subtle part here in this stage when we're really preparing, is you've got to get them committed. it may be obvious to you. It's possible the person sitting next to you in this very room, you're thinking to yourself, he is my partner, and we're in this together, and we're fully committed, and we're equally yoked. We're gonna nail this. And the person sitting next to you may be thinking, there is no way I'm calling my friends, right? So you need to ask. You need to get that commitment. Make sure that the people you think are on your team are really on your team. I was involved in one crowdfunding campaign, and it was really awkward. But they sent me an email sort of announcing that I was committed. And I didn't know how to tell them. Well, not really, not fully in, like in the way you might think I'm in on this one. And I know that happens, right? You think the people sitting around the table are committed. You have to ask, are you committed specifically? Get them actually committed, and then you've got to give them the training. So what I tell you today, you need to be able to regurgitate that and make sure you help everyone on the team understand that. I also want to encourage you to create some incentives, especially for the boosters and the champions. Whatever you do for the champions, you ought to make sure that people are aware in your circle that you'll do that. So you may want to offer recognition. There may even be some small rewards that you're giving to the champions who raise $1,000, or the one who raises the most, maybe gets the Burger King hat for a day, I don't know. But you think about what the reward and recognition ought to be. There was one group that I saw where the person that raised the most money got a trip to London. And so it's not crazy to do something that would be a financial reward for your fundraisers if you have a lot of fundraisers and you're going to raise a lot of money. Nonprofits. Generally, as we talk about rewards, there are several tiers. And so most of you simply won't offer rewards. And that's fine. You don't need to offer rewards. You want to do two things, though. You want to be creative about recognition, and you want to be clear about what you do with the money. We talked a little bit about this before, but if you're going to take $50 from someone, let them know what you can do with $50. But some of you may want to use some sort of perks and rewards, and some of you, there may be someone in the room that could offer services. For instance, I didn't see anyone from the symphony, but if you're here, like Utah Museum folks, you probably have a way to sell a pass, and so you could give away passes with your fundraising, and if you sold them on your crowdfunding campaign at the same price they're otherwise available, then essentially you're just retailing your annual passes, and there's nothing wrong with that as a part of a crowdfunding campaign. So some of you may have an opportunity to do something that's more genuinely a reward than others. If you're IHC, it may not make sense to sell emergency room visits, though.
I'm not sure how in a platform like this that I could track where each donation came from to know who to attribute that to.
Oh, yes, that's a great question, because if you're new, it may not be obvious. All of these, when you do a crowdfunding campaign, you get the data, right? So you know every person who donated. You're going to get their email address. Usually you can ask for additional information. Of course, once you have their email address, you can ask them for additional information. But certainly, these are all people you can add to your mailing list for future fundraising. So
I'm talking about for the purpose of rewarding those who generated that donation.
Okay. And that is another great point. As we talk about organizing the team, now, not every website will do this, so that's one of the things you want to think about. But one of my favorite features of Fundly and Razoo, and I don't know of any others that do it, but I'm sure they're not the only ones, you can set up your teams almost like a multi-level sales plan. So it's only 3 tiers. So you'd have your main campaign, and then you can have an unlimited number of teams below that, and below each team there can be an individual, a number of members, and each member of a team gets his own page, and each team has its own page, and all the money goes into the master campaign. So you can really track that on a wonderful level. So you're not only knowing where the money came from the donor standpoint, but you know which of your fundraisers raised the money. The only exception to that is if people don't come with the link and they go to Razoo and they search for your organization, they may go to your master page and donate there, and so someone may not be getting credit for a donation, but in general, people will be sharing the link to their own page where they're crowdfunding for you. And that's one of the great things about crowdfunding, really, is the idea of not having this be organizationally centered entirely, but to get those champions, typically volunteers and board members, who are accessing their network on your behalf, raising money for you.
Real quick, I did a webinar yesterday that some others may have done or sat in on, put on by Razoo.
Right.
Like an hour-long webinar about lovey tugging. So I guess I'd suggest doing that if you can. I think they're offering it a couple more times. And it talks about that. So it is. You have the people. I assume what you're saying is you would train the people to know that if they want to be part of kind of the contest side of it,
Right.
they set up their own fundraiser that is then funneled towards your organization, and then it would be tracked, right?
Right.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I want you to be creative about what you do for recognitions and the appreciation you show. For instance, my favorite story ever of what someone did that's free and it's just a recognition. It was an organization that was raising money to save sea turtles down in Central America. And what they would do is, as they released the hatchlings into the ocean, they would write your name in the sand. So it would say Sally there in the sand, and they would put the turtles, and the turtle would run across your name, and they would videotape the turtle scurrying across your name into the sea, right? And then they would just post that on YouTube, send you a link, right? And then you could post that on Facebook anywhere you wanted, right? And wouldn't that make you feel good that you'd saved a sea turtle? You actually have the video of the sea turtle you saved. Well, it would be no problem to do that 10 times, right? You couldn't do that 1,000 times. So you can't do that to everyone, for everyone that gives you $10. But you could give that to everyone who gave you $500 or $1,000. You figure out what the threshold is. But you can do some creative things, some things you can't do for everyone. But there are things you can do for the people that donate more. Be careful not to violate the standards you already have. You probably have ways of recognizing people who are giving money each year. You don't want someone who gives $50 during your crowdfunding campaign to get more recognition than someone who gives you $5,000 during the annual campaign. But think about ways that you can creatively express appreciation. Now, let's talk about a press release. I've told you that accessing the media is really one of the key and most important parts of a successful crowdfunding campaign. As a member of the media, I know I appreciate when I get a full press release. It's sort of becoming unpopular to send a traditional press release. I often get a media alert, right? It includes some hints about what's going on and invites me to attend an event. Well, very few news organizations have the bandwidth to send people. I don't know why this pattern has developed, because it strikes me as being exactly the opposite direction of what the media needs. The media has less bandwidth, right? The newspapers have fewer reporters, fewer people available to write stuff. What do they want more than anything? They want user-generated content, right? The Deseret News is successful almost entirely by having most of the content on the Deseret News website now is either very low budget compensation or zero compensation writers, right? That's how their model works. So every outlet is struggling with that. Give them something they can copy and paste right into the newspaper, right? Or right onto their blog, right onto their website. You know, KSL, for instance, as a radio, news, and television site, and yet they have a lot of printed news now on KSL.com. You want to make it easy for everyone to share your news however they're going to do it. So let me give you some, you can find a template online easily enough. You don't need to be a professional. You don't have to hire a professional. You can do it yourself. If you have professionals, please use them. And if they tell you not to send a press release, tell them they're nuts. But send a few keys. Just write a compelling title, and don't worry so much about clever as factual and clear. Clear is more important than clever. And then a subtitle. A subtitle, maybe 25 words that explain something. Not necessarily a full sentence, but it can be a full sentence. And then you're going to write an introductory paragraph. By the time you are done with the title, the subtitle, and the introductory paragraph, you should pretty much have told the story. You should be telling what your cause is, what you're crowdfunding, where you're crowdfunding, so Indiegogo or Razoo or whatever ought to be in that sentence, the name of your organization. All the basics should be in that. We should be there by the time we get to the end of the first paragraph. Then you're going to have another paragraph that kind of explains the rest of the information. Then you're going to have a couple of quotes, one or two quotes. This isn't a quote from Nietzsche, right? It's not an existential comment on your cause. No, this is your executive director says, one of the people we help, the chairman of your board says, those kinds of quotes, right? And you're just going to explain what you're doing again, but now you're using quotes to do it. And then at the end, you'll always include a paragraph about your organization so that people have that boilerplate. More and more I'm seeing press releases where that boilerplate is excluded from the formal press release. I would keep it up in the press release. You usually mark the end of the press release with 3 pound signs, just to say that's the end. You want people to put that paragraph about you in the newspaper, right? So put it in the press release, not after it. Yes?
Just a couple questions. If we are to send the press release, how far out? Because again, we don't want to be lost, but
Yes, it's really a challenge, and there is no, I'm not sure of the right answer, and here's the reason why. If you're sending the press release to a magazine, unless they have a website where they're putting up daily content, the printed magazine, the content is done probably 60 days before the magazine hits the shelves. That's probably not true with Time magazine, but most magazines, especially the smaller circulation magazines, are working on kind of old calendars, and that content is done at least 30 days in advance. On the other hand, daily news outlets like newspapers and radio and television, their news is, it's old if it's a week old. So there isn't a single answer that's right. If you're really going to be sophisticated, you'd probably try and time it appropriately for each different kind of publication. But I would certainly send one out in the weeks before the campaign launches, and probably it won't get much uptake. You hope it gets read and gets someone's attention, and we'll talk about how to do that later. But then I will send another press release after your campaign starts, and you're off to the races. And we'll talk about this more. But certainly the first one probably should go out a few weeks before the campaign starts.
and then I apologize, just to follow up. I know most of us here are probably here for the Love Utah.
Yeah.
So you said Love Utah is putting a ton of groundwork in. They're going to be helping us
Yes.
get the word out. This is a statewide day. Do you feel each individual nonprofit then should send their own?
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question because it would be tempting to just ride along. And you can, right? There will be a lot of attention, but the general Love Utah, Give Utah news that the Community Foundation of Utah will be organizing will not be able to target any of the individual organizations very effectively. And the media will be much more interested in your organizations, even if they get the press release and the attention and we're leveraging it, right? Because it's the Love Utah, Give Utah is a story because in one day we hope to raise $2 million, right? That's a story, but very quickly they want to know, well, who's getting that money? And the Community Foundation of Utah isn't getting that money. You're getting that money, right? And so they need you. And the Community Foundation, it's a cute icon, and we don't have great face. We need you in order to be out there and to provide the face and the interesting stories for where the money is going. So absolutely, I would encourage you to do the media yourselves for Love Utah, Give Utah. Yes?
I just have to piggyback off her question. The media is a very organic feature. It just moves in more as things go on and happen every day. So UNA is going to be doing all this groundwork and all this help. So how do you recommend that we avoid all of us sending the press release the same week, and then UNA is sending all of this information to the media, and then should we create a schedule?
No, I appreciate what you're saying. What I would do is I would focus as much as you can on people that are going to be interested in you. So if you're looking at the Deseret News and the Tribune, don't think about those as one outlet. Think about that as in each paper there are 100 reporters, right? So figure out the reporters that are going to be interested in your stuff. They either write about your neighborhood, they write about your issues, so look at those. Now, that's probably still going to mean that 6 people or 10 people at each of those newspapers are getting 300 press releases. So yeah, you're competing for attention, but that's no different than any other day, right? I write and I get 200 pitches every single week, and it's just part of what I deal with, and I pay attention to everyone I can. I read every pitch that comes in. So I think most people are going to, you're fighting for attention, and that's why you want to have the clever face and you want to go through the exercise. Some people in this room hearing this still won't do it. So it won't be quite as many as you might fear. There won't be 700 press releases going to each person.
I was just going to speak to that too. I know last year the Community Foundation in our planning meetings gearing up to Love Utah, Give Utah had very specific timing requests for us about don't send them on this day, or we've already coordinated with the editors and they don't want you to send them until this time so that their fax machines don't get blown up or their emails don't get blown up all at one time. So they gave us some guidelines to follow in that. But I just piggyback off of what you're saying. I think more importantly, our focus should be on targeted reporters or other outlets outside of the Tribune and the Deseret News that are focused on our intentions and our neighborhoods and our communities. And those are the people that are going to help spread our message more so than a front page on Deseret News.
Yeah. None of us are going to be on the front page of the Deseret News, probably. But one of the things to remember, just adding to that, is that there are a lot of bloggers. I mean, I think there are 100 million bloggers in the world, maybe more now. That's plenty to choose from. There are a lot. And so anyone that will write 300 to 500 words about you, you ought to be excited to have them write. Because even some mommy blogger with 300 devoted followers is going to get you meaningful attention, especially if she writes something clever about you that people can share on social media. So don't dismiss anyone. Be reaching out to everyone who has an audience. So let's talk a little bit about targeting the media. So you want to reach out to every blogger, everybody who's covering your space, everyone who's covering your community, your geography. Don't leave anyone out, and include national media, especially. You won't get national media for Love Utah, Give Utah. It's a general rule. But for other campaigns, anytime you're doing anything else, you can get it. Now, I neglected to say at the beginning, I see some people taking notes, taking pictures of the slides. The slides will be made available to you if you give me your feedback sheet at the end. What I'll do is I'll give you a sheet where you can download not only the slides, but also my book, Crowdfunding for Social Good, at no charge. So, but when you're doing a campaign, you're looking for national media attention. One of my favorite tips is to reach out to and find the local writers for Forbes and Huffington Post. Those are national outlets that have national attention, but they both have hundreds and hundreds of writers. So that means there are dozens here in Utah that write for those publications with a national audience. So it's a great way to find, you all know someone who writes for Forbes or for Huffington Post, or you know someone who does. So take a minute to find those people.
Is there a way to find that out? I mean, is there a source that helps you find that out?
There may be, but I don't know it. So just ask around. Be sure to ask the people in your circle, your partners and your champions, who do we know? And you'll find that you can find people in your circle. Now, the last part of the preparation that we're going to do is the video. And we'll take about 10 more minutes and then we'll take a break. But we're going to do, before we're done, before we take a break, we're actually going to make a video. So I want you to be thinking about if you want to star in this video. Okay? Now, the video that goes on a crowdfunding page is probably the most overemphasized part of crowdfunding. And I'm always a little bit baffled by it. I think one of the reasons is there is good data that suggests that campaigns with a good video raise about twice as much as campaigns without a video. But here's the thing. Campaigns with video